There are moments in life that arrive not with noise, but with silence so deep, it echoes through the soul. Sometimes it's not a thunderclap that shifts our course, it's a quiet vibration, a phone ringing in an ordinary hour, carrying with it the extraordinary weight of transformation. Everything changed the day I got that call. Not just because of the message it brought, but because of what it awakened within me. The realization that life is not a straight line, but a sacred weaving of moments, some painful, some divine, all meaningful. Every delay, every detour, every unanswered prayer is not absence but preparation. We are not wandering alone. We are being choreographed, gently, invisibly, into a dance far greater than we can comprehend. That call wasn't just for me. It was from life itself reminding me, you are exactly where you are meant to be. Because in the grand symphony of existence, even the pauses are part of the music. Before that call came, life was fine, you know? Just fine. I was doing what I thought I was supposed to be doing. Wake up, go to work, answer emails, keep up appearances. Smile when you're supposed to smile. Keep your head down. Try not to fall behind. Weekends were the only reward for surviving the week. Monday mornings felt like a reset button I never asked for. And the truth is, I didn't question it. Not really. Because that's what we're taught, right? That routine is the goal. Predictability means you're responsible. Consistency means you're succeeding. So I kept checking boxes, collecting achievements, pretending that checking boxes meant progress. But deep down, if I'm honest, there was this dull hum of restlessness. This low-level buzz of unease. A quiet whisper that kept asking, is this it? But I ignored it. Because silence is easier than confrontation. Because answering that voice would mean admitting that I wasn't really fulfilled, that maybe I wasn't even awake. So I stayed busy enough to avoid myself. And that's how most of us live, by the way. Not badly just asleep with our eyes open. It wasn't that I was miserable. I wasn't. And that's the trap. Comfort is seductive. It doesn't punch you in the gut. It slowly wraps you in a blanket of a good enough. And that blanket, it's warm. It's familiar. It feels safe. But it also keeps you from growing. It keeps you from asking the hard questions. It keeps you from becoming who you were meant to be. I knew I wasn't fully alive. But I didn't know I knew. Not until that call came. And here's something I've learned since then. Rock bottom doesn't always feel like a crash. Sometimes it feels like numbness, like the quiet suffocation of a life unlived. You don't have to be in crisis to be lost. You just have to be disconnected from meaning. That was me. I was surviving in a world that celebrates survival as success. But I wasn't present. I wasn't present. I wasn't connected. And that disconnect, that's the most dangerous place to live, because it feels almost like peace, but it's not. It's stagnation. It's potential going unused. It's the slow erosion of purpose. You see, we wait for signs. We wait for the lightning bolt, the miracle, the divine interruption. But most of the time, before something changes externally, there's already a storm brewing internally. And most of us ignore it because it doesn't hurt enough. Not yet. We get so good at tolerating dissatisfaction. We get so skilled at adapting to unfulfillment that it becomes normal. And the longer we stay in that almost okay space, the harder it becomes to believe we were meant for something more. But here's the thing. Something always comes. Maybe it's a phone call. Maybe it's a loss. Maybe it's a loss. Maybe it's a moment of truth you can't look away from. But when it comes, it doesn't just break the silence. It makes you realize you were asleep the whole time. That call didn't just bring news. It brought clarity. It didn't change me. It woke me. And when it did, I didn't feel shocked. I felt like I just remembered something I'd been trying to forget. That life is short, precious, and not meant to be tolerated. It's meant to be lived. The question isn't what changed after that call. The question is, why did I wait so long for a call to start living? It was just a regular afternoon. Nothing dramatic. No thunder in the sky. No warning signs. Just a phone buzzing on the table. You know those moments when something seems completely ordinary? Until it's not? That was one of them. I almost didn't pick up. I was in the middle of something unimportant. Maybe an email, Maybe scrolling through a screen I wouldn't remember 2 minutes later. But something in me paused, and I answered, and that's when it happened. One call, one conversation, and the ground under my feet shifted. Not with noise, but with knowing. You don't always realize in the moment that your life just changed. Sometimes it takes days. Sometimes you feel it instantly. For me, it was like a curtain being pulled back. I could suddenly see everything more clearly, not just what was happening in that moment, but everything that had led to it. The voice on the other end? It brought news I wasn't ready for. The kind of news that doesn't ask if you have time. It just arrives. Uninvited. Unapologetic. Unapologetic. It doesn't care about your schedule or your plans or what kind of day you thought you were having. It just shows up and says, everything you believed about what matters. We're going to revisit that now. It wasn't even just the content of the call. Yes, the words hit hard. Yes, the news broke something open, but what changed me was the weight of the moment. The realization that life doesn't wait for us to be ready. It doesn't pause so we can get organized. It doesn't send a warning before it delivers the truth. It just shows up. Huh. And when it does, it doesn't knock. It breaks the door down. That call was the moment I realized how fragile everything is. Not just time, not just relationships, everything. Our assumptions, our routines, our illusion of control. We think we've got it figured out. We think we have time. And then something happens, and suddenly we see how little control we actually have, and how much we've been sleepwalking through the days. I hung up the phone, and for a moment, everything around me felt still. But inside, something had started moving, something I couldn't unfeel or ignore anymore. And that movement was truth. Truth that I had been postponing hard conversations. Truth that I had been playing it safe. Truth that I had been playing it safe. Truth that I had been mistaking comfort for meaning. The most dangerous thing about life is how easy it is to drift. To just float through the days under the illusion that you're headed somewhere, only to realize you've been circling the same island over and over again. That call interrupted the drift. It pulled me out of the current. It forced me to ask a question I hadn't dared ask in years. If this is all there is it enough? And the answer hit me harder than the call itself. No, it wasn't. Not even close. Because I hadn't been showing up fully. I hadn't been living with urgency or depth. I was filling the calendar, but I wasn't filling my soul. I was busy, but I wasn't present. That call made all of that visible. It forced me to feel the things I'd been numbing. And once you feel that kind of clarity, you can't go back. You start seeing everything differently. You realize how many things you tolerated because you were afraid of starting over. You recognize the people you kept around because they were familiar, not because they brought you alive. To. You see the work you've done not as meaningful, but as maintenance, something to keep the machine running while your heart stands still, and you realize, maybe for the first time, that the scariest part of life isn't change. It's never changing. That call, it didn't just interrupt my day. It ended one chapter and began another, not because of what was said, but because of what it sparked. It made the discomfort of staying the same greater than the fear of becoming something more. It made truth impossible to unhear. And sometimes, that's all it takes. One moment, one message, one moment, one message. One call that rips you out of the life you've accepted and dares you to imagine the one you haven't even begun living. Because the moment you realize you've been asleep, that's the moment you begin to wake up.
I wish I could say that after the call, everything got better, that the clouds cleared, the path lit up, and I walked confidently into a brand new life. That would be a neat story. But that's not what happened. What actually came next was messy, uncomfortable, and deeply human. See, we like the idea of transformation. We romanticize it. But no one talks about the part in between. The part where you're no longer who you were, but not yet who you're becoming. That space is disorienting. It's like your internal compass got reset, and now every step feels like a question mark. After the call, I found myself in that space. The quiet kind of chaos. I was suddenly aware of how much of my life had been built on assumptions I'd never challenged. I started noticing things I used to overlook. The way I said yes to things that didn't matter. The way I avoided difficult conversations. The way I smiled when I wasn't okay. All of it, habits formed not out of intention, but out of fear and comfort. And the truth is, I didn't know what to do with all that awareness. It's one thing to have a wake-up call. It's another thing to know what the hell to do with it. You think, okay, I'm awake now, but what's next? I remember sitting alone one evening. No noise, no distractions, just me and this overwhelming sense of heaviness. And I realized what it was: grief. Not for someone else, but for myself. For the years I'd spent chasing things that didn't matter. For the parts of me I had silenced just to fit in. For the life I had accepted, thinking it was all I deserved. That was the breakdown. But what I didn't see then was that the breakdown was also the beginning of the breakthrough. It didn't come from some big, heroic decision. It came from the smallest possible act. I stopped pretending. I stopped pretending that I was fine. I stopped pretending that I had it all figured out. I stopped pretending that a normal was working for me. And the moment I did that, the healing began, not all at once, but in pieces. I started asking questions I had buried under busyness. What do I really want? What kind of person do I want to become? Who am I trying to impress? Why am I afraid to be honest? Those questions didn't give me immediate answers, but they cracked something open. They created space for truth to enter. See, real change doesn't start with motivation. It starts with honesty. It starts the moment you're willing to admit that something isn't right, and that you're done pretending it is. That's when the breakthrough begins. And it rarely looks like a grand transformation. It usually looks like small, consistent, unglamorous choices. Saying no to the things you used to say yes to just to keep the peace. Saying yes to the things that scare you because they feel real. Giving yourself permission to not have it all figured out. That call didn't fix my life. It didn't hand me a new purpose on a silver platter. But it did give me permission to stop lying to myself. And that was enough to start. The funny thing is, I thought the hard part would be facing the truth. But the real challenge was allowing myself to sit in it, without rushing to escape it, without numbing it, without turning it into a productivity project, just being in it, feeling it, feeling it. Because sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is sit still while everything inside you is changing. And when you allow that, when you stop trying to bypass the discomfort and instead choose to grow through it, something begins to shift. Slowly, quietly, but powerfully. You begin to rebuild not the life you had, but the life you were meant to have, not based on fear, but on authenticity. Not from pressure, but from alignment. And when that happens, you realize something profound. The breakdown wasn't a detour. It was the doorway. It was the moment life stopped whispering and started speaking loud enough that I couldn't ignore it anymore. And when life speaks like that, you don't run, you listen. There's a moment in every turning point, after the breakdown, after the numbness, after you've sat in the discomfort long enough to realize you can't go back, when you have to choose. And it is a choice. Maybe not the circumstances, maybe not the pain, but how you respond to it, that's yours. I remember waking up one morning, weeks after the call, and realizing that something in me had quietly shifted. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with fireworks or a motivational soundtrack. It was just this quiet voice deep down that said, enough with the excuses, enough with the pretending, enough with the waiting for something outside of me to fix what was inside of me. And that was the moment I chose growth over grief, not because grief isn't real. It is. It's valid. It's necessary. But there's a point where you stop using it as a blanket and start using it as fuel. Where you stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, what can I build from this? It's funny, we wait for clarity before we act. We think we need to have a 5-year plan before we take the first step. But that's not how it works. Growth doesn't come with a map. It comes with movement. It comes when you say, I may not know exactly where I'm going, but I'm not staying here. So I started small. I started with the things I could control. How I showed up every day. How honest I was with myself. How I treated the people around me. I started taking inventory of what was real and what was just noise. I unfollowed people and ideas that made me feel like I wasn't enough. I stepped away from relationships that only worked when I played small. I started asking different questions. Not a how do I get back to where I was, but who do I want to become now? Because that's what grief does. It shows you what matters. And when you lean into it, when you let it clean out all the false attachments, it makes space. Space for something real. Growth isn't about fixing yourself. It's about finding yourself again. The part of you that got buried under expectations, under fear, under the weight of performing for approval. That part of you, it's still there. And pain, when you let it speak, has a way of leading you back to it. I started taking care of that part. I started protecting my energy like it was sacred, because it is. I stopped saying yes to things just to avoid disappointing people. I stopped explaining myself to people who were committed to misunderstanding me. And I started surrounding myself with people who didn't just see the new version of me. They expected it. You see, growth requires grieving, not just people or moments, but identities. You have to be willing to let go of who you were, even if that version of you helped you survive. Because survival isn't the goal. Wholeness is. Alignment is. Integrity is. There's this myth that healing makes you softer. It doesn't. Real growth makes you clearer, stronger, sharper. Not harder. You still feel deeply. But now you feel with purpose. Now you know how to protect your peace. Now you know the difference between discomfort that helps you grow and discomfort that's just keeping you stuck. I didn't get there overnight. No one does. There were days I wanted to go back to the numbness. Days I questioned if any of this was worth it. But every time I came close to slipping back, I remembered. I've already lived that version of me. I know how that story ends. This time, I wanted something different. Not perfect, not painless. Just real. And real only comes when you choose it. Not once, not twice, but every day. You wake up and choose to rise, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. Because pain will visit all of us. But whether it becomes your prison or your path, that's up to you. Growth begins the moment you stop running from your pain and start walking with it towards something greater. You know what's strange. Sometimes it's only after everything falls apart that you finally start to see clearly. Like your whole life is a puzzle you've been forcing together with the wrong pieces. And now that it's in pieces on the floor, you can finally see the picture for what it was never supposed to be. That's what happened to me after I chose growth. I didn't have a plan, no roadmap, just this growing sense that I couldn't keep living the same way I had. And when you step into that space, that uncertain, open space, it's terrifying at first. But then something interesting happens. Clarity starts to visit you. Not all at once, not in some big cinematic moment, but slowly, quietly, a pattern emerges. A truth reveals itself. Something that had been there all along, just beneath the noise. I started to realize there was a thread connecting everything that had happened. Every struggle, every delay, every moment that made me ask, why now, or why me? It wasn't random, it was preparation. That was the most powerful insight I had. That all the pain, all the detours, all the uncomfortable moments I wanted to fast forward through, they weren't just part of the story. They were the story, and they were pointing me somewhere. Somewhere with meaning, somewhere with purpose. It's so easy to think that purpose is something we find in a moment of glory or in a dream job, or after we make it. But in my experience, purpose isn't something you stumble into. It's something you slowly uncover through the moments that break you and the choices that rebuild you. After that call, when everything in my life shifted, I kept coming back to one question. What is this pain trying to teach me? That question changed everything. Because once you start asking it, you begin to see that purpose isn't some grand destination. It's what shows up when you finally stop running from your life and start paying attention to it. Purpose was hiding in my conversations, in the things people asked me for again and again. In the words I kept writing but never sharing. In the energy I felt when I showed up fully. No mask, no script, just me, honest and raw. It wasn't dramatic, but it felt right, like something inside of me had clicked into place. I wasn't chasing meaning anymore, I was living in it. And I'll tell you what's beautiful about that. When you find a purpose that fits, it feels less like ambition and more like alignment. You're no longer forcing your way through the world. You're moving with it. You stop needing external validation because you've finally connected to something deeper, something internal, something real. But here's the part people don't talk about enough. Purpose is inconvenient. It will pull you away from the familiar. It will stretch you. It will challenge the way you've seen yourself. It will demand that you leave behind the comfort of who you used to be to make space for who you really are. For me, it meant speaking out. When I wanted to stay quiet, it meant sharing my story, even when I wasn't sure how people would receive it. It meant showing up fully, not just when I was strong, but especially when I was vulnerable. Because that's when people truly connect with you. That's when impact begins. And once you've tasted that kind of alignment, once you've stood in the center of who you are and seen the way it resonates with others, it's impossible to go back to a life of pretending. You stop asking, what do they want me to be? And you start asking, what was I made for? That's the shift. That's the day it stops being about performance and starts being about purpose. I used to think success was about reaching something. Now I believe it's about becoming something honest, something grounded, something that exists for a reason beyond itself. And the best part, you don't have to have all the answers to start living with purpose. You just have to be willing to follow the small signals, the moments that make you feel alive. The times when someone says, a thank you, I needed that, and you realize maybe the pain you went through wasn't in vain. That's what purpose does. It redeems the pain. It gives weight to the wounds. It makes it all worth it. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The day you stop searching for your purpose and start living it is the day everything starts to make sense.